was another question about whether I saw the film Don't Look Up, which I did, although I had to start my subscription to Netflix after years of being away from it just to see that, but it was worth it. I'm glad I saw it. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a new film that's really an allegory about climate change denial. Although in this case, the other side of the allegory is there's a comet heading for Earth, and the movie features these scientists who are trying to get people to care about that and to do whatever is possible to avoid that catastrophe, and yet they can't get through all the different layers of distractions that we live in this contemporary period. And that actually, to me, was the most useful piece of this film, was it really satirized how distracted we are in our daily lives. You think about all of the different information we have coming in, the entertainment, whether it's streaming or television or podcasts or whatever it may be. We're really overwhelmed to the point where we can choose what we want to hear about. And maybe a comet heading for Earth is something that we don't want to hear about, so instead we'll focus on celebrity gossip and that sort of thing. So that's a very important point about why are more people not really concerned about climate change right now. We've created these systems that allow us to distract ourselves in ways that are entertaining and enjoyable, and we can tune out the bad news if we want to do that. But the other thing that I found really interesting about that was the way that people in power were trying to deflect concern about the comet heading for Earth, because that's very much something that's happening right now. In fact, in 2021, Michael Mann published a book called The New Climate War, and that book looks specifically at the fossil fuel funded organizations that are out there trying to create some sense of denial about climate change, to create dissension among the people who would otherwise be united in their concern about climate change. All sorts of different strategies that in fact these lobbyists learned from working for the tobacco industry and for the gun lobby. So there are lots of people. I mentioned earlier that climate change hashtag posts on social media, about 25% of those are created by bots. And these are not well-meaning bots. They're bots that are really, and trolls as well, that are really interested in helping distract us or decide us that it's more important to argue about personal plane travel versus carbon pricing or that sort of thing. So it's very important that we're aware of this and that we recognize that we are surrounded by allies in the movement to address human-caused climate change. That it is not really useful or even possible to honestly separate the climate change struggle versus the struggle for social justice or the struggle for reforming elections in this country, that we're all allies working for the same basic sets of changes. So when we find ourselves hearing messages from people, even people that we know and trust and respect, that lead to divisions between this, that's a great moment to stop and say, okay, at least to ourselves, this is not useful for the work that we're doing. The distinction between is this the best kind of activism or is that the best kind of activism doesn't get us forward. How can we honor what other people are doing while we're also following our own calling, really, towards doing the work that needs to be done? There's some reason for hope these days. One of the things that I saw actually from Paul Hawken's book Regeneration was one of the authors of the IPCC document on climate change in 2020 said that, we used to think that even if we stopped carbon emissions now, it would take generations before we could start to see an impact of that. But more recently, we've heard that, in fact, if we stopped carbon emissions now, we would probably return to a fairly somewhat normal state within a couple of decades. That's really hopeful. You can also take hope at just the number of people there are who are out there trying to make a difference in the many-sided front against a world that is really damaged by climate change, by social inequalities, by the loss of habitat, by just these patterns of behavior that are not sustainable. So let's take hope from our allies, especially the youth,